The Galactic Republic is an unimaginably ancient civilization, whose history is shrouded in a darkness that has remained impervious to even the most studious of historians. However, recent archaeological discoveries and technological breakthroughs have allowed us to peel back the shroud and peer into the murky primordial waters from which the original Republic emerged. The unprecedented discovery of an ancient Dibendu holocron in the Thape system was the most significant of such breakthroughs, as the information contained within was recorded in 5 distinct ancient languages. One of these is an archaic dialect of Kamasi, from which we can partially decipher the other 4 texts. Although the Thape holocron itself is of a very esoteric theological nature, and thus has little historical value, one of the languages we have been able to translate from it is that of the ancient Drawl. The Drawl themselves kept extensive historical records of the ancient galaxy, though the language in which these were written had until now been lost to time. And it is from these records that we are finally able to piece together some of the forgotten fragments of early galactic history. We begin our story several centuries before the founding of the Republic, following the downfall of the Rakatan Infinite Empire. The Rakata were a Force-sensitive species that had been corrupted by their own dark side technologies and forged an empire that, at its peak, stretched from their homeworld of Lehon throughout the region now commonly known as the Core Worlds, and even as far as Tatooine in the south and Dantooine in the north, as evidenced by the Rakatan star maps excavated on these worlds. This all came to an end about 7 centuries before the founding of the Republic, when a mysterious plague spread rapidly through the Infinite Empire, decimating the Rakatans and rendering them unable to perceive the Force. One by one, the worlds of the Infinite Empire rose up against their alien overlords and liberated themselves from Rakatan domination. Most of these uprisings were unsurprisingly led by Force sensitives, who subsequently established themselves as both liberators of their world and its people, and as a vanguard against a potential Rakatan reoccupation. As its name suggests, the Infinite Empire was purported to be just that, infinite, and by the time of its downfall, this belief was deeply ingrained in the minds of its many conquered peoples. It was commonly assumed that it would only be a matter of time before the Rakata would return, and that its former subject worlds must be prepared if they were to stand a chance of repelling the next invasion. In most cases, the Force sensitives who assumed command of former Rakatan worlds during this period did little to dismantle the political infrastructure of the Infinite Empire. In fact, many lauded the glory and prestige associated with it, and some even assumed the Rakatan title of Praetor. This was a dangerous game, however, as rulers who styled themselves too much on the former Rakatan oppressors ran the risk of being branded as tyrants and attracting the ire of their subjects. Additionally, Rakatan society was inherently tainted by the dark side, and rulers who leaned too heavily on its political framework inevitably became corrupted themselves. Some began to see themselves as gods, and demanded to be worshipped as such by their subjects. Now, to understand why Force-sensitive individuals were seen as so important and all-powerful in these days, we must consider 2 important facts. Firstly, the Jedi Order did not exist at this time, and Force-based disciplines in general were rare and primitive, mostly developed from the knowledge left behind by the Rakata. This knowledge was indispensable to anyone who wished to assert their sovereignty over a world or star system, and as such, those who possessed it guarded it intensely, believing that bestowing such gifts upon those deemed unworthy would lead to destruction of their world, or even the larger galaxy. In some cases, Force-sensitive rulers, or Praetors, would die before having taught their secrets to a successor, and with their deaths, the ability to manipulate the Force gradually faded into myth. This deliberate obscurantism of Force use caused a mystification of the Praetors, who were increasingly seen as magicians, sorcerers, supernatural entities, and even in some cases, gods. The second fact that explains the exceedingly high status associated with Force sensitives during this period concerns hyperspace travel. As some of you may know, the Rakata traversed the galaxy and built their infinite empire using a kind of proto-hyperdrive known as the Force Drive. Unlike the modern hyperdrive, this device was not purely mechanical, but also had a force-based component which required a Force user to operate. The process by which a user operated the force drive was agonizingly painful, and for this reason, the Rakata enslaved force sensitives from across their empire to fly their ships through hyperspace on their behalf. In fact, many historians have speculated that this was the initial impetus for the expansion of the Infinite Empire, especially given the fact that the Rakata were mostly interested in colonizing worlds inhabited by force-sensitive species. Following their abrupt downfall and withdrawal from the wider galaxy, Rakatan technology was abandoned on many formerly colonized worlds, including starships and force drives, and these were able to be reverse-engineered by the native inhabitants to varying success. However, as previously stated, only force sensitives were able to operate these machines, and only through intense physical and psychological pain. This meant that common folk relied completely on force users for interstellar travel and communication with the galaxy outside of their star system. Bearing this in mind, it is perhaps easy to see why the belief that force users were godly beings was so prevalent. They could effectively travel wherever they pleased, while common folk mostly lived and died on the planet on which they were born, and knew very little about the wider galaxy. Because of the primitive nature of hyperspace technology during this time period, interstellar travel was rare, and the galaxy largely consisted of isolated star systems ruled by one or sometimes a few Praetors that rarely interacted with one another. Nevertheless, some ambitious Praetors took it upon themselves to expand their domains, guided in their quests by old Rakatan star maps. The most successful of these built empires that spanned entire galactic sectors. Now, while this may not seem very impressive to modern listeners, such distances would have been incomprehensible to the common people of the time. Unfortunately, these emperors were all invariably corrupted by the power they accrued, and it was in the midst of this dark and tyrannical chapter of galactic history that the Republic was founded.